Welcome to the 5th Blue Forge Group monthly open mic. My name is Maxwell DeMarco. I'm an artisan working with 3 of Blue Forge Group's 4 divisions and a full-time on-site volunteer. Blue Forge is an entirely volunteer-run 501c3 nonprofit founded in 1989, dedicated to empowering and educating artisans who've been marginalized by the mainstream. Our artisans couldn't be more different. They might not always get along on social media, but when they gather under the Blue Forge name, the art always comes first. Today we'll hear from artisans from several Blue Forge divisions. They'll each step into the spotlight in the Black Box studio here on the Blue Forge campus and earn this month's open mic badge, created by illustrator and actor Faith DeMarco. Without further ado,
hello, I'm Diane McPhee, and I have written a series, and the first book is Taken by Surprise. It's a series about a detective from Boston, and so I'm going to read you an excerpt from it. Driving back to the office, Alan had time to consider living under the same roof with Sam. Was he afraid his carefully constructed life would fall apart now? Would his routines be judged or ignored? He often brought work home and made important phone calls at all hours, and this could result in confidentiality issues. Alan needed to consider all of this and make necessary arrangements if this was going to work. He had an extra bedroom, so that was easily decided, but Sam would need to take some responsibility for things. Should he ask Sam to pay rent? He read somewhere that parents who had adult children moved back home often insisted on charging rent. What about meals and chores? Did you set up a daily schedule and meet to discuss how things are going weekly, monthly, ever? Sam's mother would not be any help because she had her own worries taking care of her elderly parents. And Alan's older daughter had moved to Seattle with her family and was exhausted with work and the 2 children. Alan would have to manage things on his own. At his last checkup, Alan confided in his doctor that he was worried about growing old, and lately it had become an obsession. He complained about losing sleep at night due to reviewing the past and present and future. His doctor prescribed meds for his high blood pressure and then suggested that maybe it was time to talk to a therapist. To top it off, his dentist said he needed dental work due to grinding his teeth at night. Alan wondered if these symptoms were medical or psychological. Still ruminating, Alan parked his car at his usual spot at the precinct. He reluctantly decided that seeing someone couldn't hurt. So before he got out, he reached into his wallet and pulled out the phone number of a therapist his doctor had recommended. Once decided, he didn't equivocate. Alan called the number of Dr. Rose Gardner and left his name. The lieutenant in charge of the office greeted Alan at the door and wanted a breakdown of the fire, and if the reports revealed that it was arson and a murder. Alan reported what he knew so far from the medical examiner's report. The ME concluded 3 things. 1, the body was a male. 2, there had been several blows to the head by a blunt object. And 3, the dental records confirmed the victim's identity was Marco Miller. Alan also reported what he knew from his morning visits with Sidney Miller and Carla. Then said he had arranged a meeting with the condo manager at Marco's and to get Marco's keys. His lieutenant frowned. The press is on my heels, Alan, and I need to keep those bastards happy. Alan nodded and walked quickly into his office. Before he cleared his messy desk, he sat and considered Marco's movements once again. Why was he on St. Vital Street? Carla said she didn't have a clue why Marco went there. He finally decided to compare Carla's information with his own and start a police file on the murder. She had noted that Marco worked 3 days a week and was assigned 10 teens to counsel. Each week, he usually met them at the center or at their place of residence to ensure they were clean and attending their meetings and required programs. Carla ran a strict program. She and Alan had discussed many times how teens in Boston were like most teens around the country, feeling overwhelmed with external and internal struggles. They were dropping out of school daily. These kids were expected to cope with social and parental forces, work, school pressures, and growth issues all at once. Common problems were usually related to self-esteem and feelings of not fitting in. Add in bullying, depression, and grades, and the toxic stew interfered with eating and sleeping patterns. Teens, too, often felt judged and criticized by their parents and teachers, making them angry and confused. Defiant behaviors emerged as a result, and their emotions intensified. To get a sense of control or independence, teens turned to bad friends, drugs, and alcohol. This is where the Teen Center helped. Carla and her team of dedicated workers were tasked to open channels of clear communication with the teens they served while building trust and acceptance. Carla appreciated Marco's ability to simply direct teens to focus on a future goal and then help them succeed to get it. What would they do without him? Alan found his anxiety increasing as he read through the files Carla had given him. He stared at the papers and realized his concentration was lacking because of his own emotional upheavals. A wave of sadness over losing Marco kept washing over him, but he tried to push it aside. He would have to grieve after he solved the case. Letting out a long sigh, he hoped speaking with a therapist would help ease his mind. Dr. Rose Gardner had room on her calendar for one more client. She debated about using that time to write, since she had promised herself it would be a priority this year. But then she listened to the voicemail from this client, and her interest piqued. He was a detective, and this was unusual. Most men in that profession denied the need of counseling. Rose decided that she would meet with him for a consultation and then make the decision if this was a good fit. Detective Sharp, Rose left a voicemail. I'm free to meet with you today at 5 o'clock for a consultation. This will be an informal meeting to decide if we are a good fit. Alan responded with another voicemail immediately and agreed to meet.
Hi, I'm Bree Indigo, and I have been volunteering with Blue Forge since around 2008. Primarily, I volunteered with Blue Forge Press, Blue Forge Films, and Blue Forge Sound. Today I'm going to be reading my contribution to Unnerving Eclipse. It is titled Consummation, and it was the December story in this Unnerving. Consummation. I first met you in the spring, a spark of something unknown. As I gathered lilac sprigs, crocuses and hyacinth, I could feel your eyes, your gaze, your need, watching, waiting. And I wondered if you were a green man or a forest guardian. But when the sun broke through the clouds, you were gone, and the flowers I had gathered were wilted. Summer came with unbearable heat, a heavy, thick presence, inescapable, impenetrable, and it was then that I began to dream, my body asleep, but my mind suddenly awake, alert, alarmed, aware of you, like a thick sheen of sweat covering every inch of my skin, and I couldn't move. Screams gathered Silent, caught in my throat, my chest tight with barely enough room to draw in breath around a heart that couldn't beat any harder without escaping through a broken sternum. And I began to pray, every conscious part of me focused on the ancient words, at Terra in this fateful hour. Ochre and burgundy leaves through my window, damp earth and petrichor filled my lungs. Finally autumn arrived, and I felt like I could breathe again. And though you hadn't left on the westerly winds that blew away the oppressive heat, you weren't unexpected in this season of death. The hangman reminded me to find perspective. The wheel of fortune promised the consistency of change, and the high priestess asked I acknowledge the darkness. So when you came in the night, I was ready, waiting, anticipating you, finding the stillness the priestess required, while her mother, the empress, showed me how to find the moon, and you filled me with your shadows. The frost came early this year. December settled in like the weight of a comfortable blanket, worn thin by the memories of all it has seen. The forest grew quiet and the days grew shorter, but I had already prepared for winter, and I could feel you, watching me from the shadows, the weight of your gaze following me in the garden as I trimmed away dead leaves and old growth, making space for the promise of new blooms. The wheel of fortune always moving, reminding me of the impermanence of death and the cycle of rebirth. So when the sun set on the winter solstice, giving way to the longest, deepest night of shadows, I surrendered myself to the darkness. Like grief, demonic activity comes in stages: infestation, oppression, obsession, and the final stage is possession. You thought you would devour me. You expected resistance, a fight, but I rode out your attack like a wave, my feet pulled away from the earth, trying to keep my head above water, struggling to find air. My chest burned with a deep fire, and I opened my mouth wide, a voiceless scream. I will not be consumed. You seized the moment, taking root as I choked, the thorn tendrils of you beginning to grip tight. My mouth closed, and you thought you had me, but I am no longer paralyzed, silent, or hunted. You struggled to escape, not yet knowing you had already been devoured. I am the shadow keeper, she who hunts the darkness, daughter of Hecate, protector of the night. Bring me your demons, for winter is coming, and we will no longer be consumed.
Hello, good afternoon. Once again, this is Marshall Miller. I'm going to be doing a reading from one of my War and Peace of Alien Squid Invasion series, the first book. Hold it up here, Gathering Storm. And what I'm reading about is, give it a little bit of an update, because this is kind of a complicated story about these alien cephalopods, i.e. octopus and squids, who invade the world because we taste good. So they're running around trying to eat us, and eventually some of them decide, well, maybe we can breed them like cattle. And that's what one of the more intelligent ones is pushing. And a human called Adam Lloyd comes along, and he decides that, excuse me, he decides that he is going to try to save as much of humanity by creating kind of like a area where humans can live and try to help the squids, almost as if we were trained dogs or assistants. And he's trying to develop that kind of relationship, and the T'Challa Lord that he is basically under is coming around to kind of that understanding, but he is still working on it. So Adam Lloyd gets to go and meet T'Challa Lord at his place of residence down in the Florida Keys, on one of the key islands down there. And that's where this portion of the story is that I'm about to read. Adam walked slowly up to the T'Challa Lord's receiving area. In a sudden flash of light, a large image was projected on the nearby curved wall. He heard a loud, booming human voice. I am the great and powerful Oz. Do not arouse the wrath of the great and powerful Oz. And there was Dorothy and company projected on the wall. Shit. He'd been watching old movies again. Lord Neptune loved to view, study, and then just enjoy all forms of human pre-invasion mass media. Tashaw films, books, and other informational media often resemble National Geographic travelogues and science tapes, with large historical musical dramas similar to human operas, relating some of the greatest incidents in Tashaw history. Fiction, other than the Young's version of Grimm's fairy tales and Aesop's fables, intended to instruct also, did not exist. Making up stories for fun was seen as a waste of time or mental aberration, which was why, had his lordship not been so much more advanced than the other Tashaw in his ability to handle Earth and its humans, he probably would have been sent to the Tashaw form of a mental hospital. Tashaw did enjoy jokes and humor, but most of it was along the lines of slapstick practical jokes and the occasional "your mama is so fat" street insults, usually by adolescents and to other adolescents. Adam knew that Tashaw had such a thing. Adam just knew that if Shaw had such a thing, his lordship would have been a combination stand-up comedian and writer for situational comedies and be very successful. His lordship was reclining in a large modified hot tub. Though amphibious, the Tashaw still preferred the original liquid environment. He was waving his social tentacles in signs of complete mirth and laughter. Adam knew he was blowing bubbles from his gill slits, a sign of pure belly laughter. Adam approached him smiling, palms open towards him as a sign of mirth also. "Ah, director, my favorite human. I see you noticed my new entrance images. I found that film of yours just the other day. Such a prime example of human fantasy." The translator produced a human voice that reminded Adam of a combination of Shakespearean-trained actors from the London stage. Adam knew that Lord Neptune never did anything by chance, and probably spent many hours coming up with the right Lord voice. To human ears, Tashaw's speech sounded like a combination of porpoise clicks, sperm whale tones, and hissing. Although reproducible from computer-enhanced technology, human vocal cords were not designed for that type of communication, and there were a few sounds above and below the frequencies the human ears could not distinguish. As had been proven in the study of whales, certain of these frequencies and tones in ocean water could be heard for miles, resulting in an excellent long-range communication. Thus, when the Tashaw adolescents and young left their creche birth areas to roam the oceans as part of growing up, they never were really out of earshot of adults. Adam chuckled. "Yes, your lordship, The Wizard of Oz is a movie classic. Tell me, are you thinking of changing your human name to the Wizard?" The Tashaw Lord laughed again. "No, my director. Although I am great and powerful, I definitely have no need to hide behind a curtain. Now, human, come closer and have a seat in the chair I provided. I have much information to impart to you, and I imagine you have some updates for me." "Yes, sir. But first, I have something you will like." Adam reached into the satchel and produced a couple large stalks of sugar cane. Tashaw's eyes were very large and extremely sensitive. Lord Neptune knew what Adam was removing from the satchel before it was completely in view. "Ah, some more of that delicious sweet cane. Please, hand it to me." His lordship reached out a social tentacle to Adam and gently took the sugar cane from Adam's proffered hand. He placed one stalk up out of the hot tub and then gently fed the other into his mouth, hidden from view by facial tentacles. If for no other reason than this delicious cane, I think I've convinced the greater majority of my fellow lords that humans can be of greater service than just sources of meat. You could not grow sugar cane yourself? Outside of the natural environment, it would probably not be the same. We grow many things in our organic tanks and vats, but the results are never as good as those things produced naturally. That is also why we never grew any Tashaw young in the tanks, not to mention it would seem perverted, I think is a good word. The Greys, some bipedal warriors, and those you call frontmen are the only higher life forms we have attempted. We eventually found or produced enough breeding pairs to result in natural growth of the cyborg warriors, robocops you call them, and other human relations, as natural growth produces a much better project. The same with your original meat creatures? Yes, Director. When the plague hit, in order for growth in the tanks and vats, we eventually produced sufficient non-affected sperm and eggs of our meat creatures to start producing fresh meat. The results, though edible in the strictest sense, were very disappointment. This led to the great voyage here.
My name is Pauline Uvalde, and I'm an artisan at Blue Forge Press and Blue Forge Sound. My open mic presentation for May 2026 will discuss the camera in the written version of Thesis, my first novella, and its episodic audio adaptation, which at time of recording is in pre-production right now. When I refer to the camera as a character, I'm referring to both the first-person point of view and how it's used, and the prominence of the camera as an object in the narrative. Not just that it enables the plot, but that its presence is a source of conflict. I'm going to discuss the inspirations for the camera as a character existing, and how I manifested this trait of the story in both the novella and the promotional shorts for the audio adaptation on Blue Forge Films' YouTube channel. Regarding my film inspirations, my primary one was the film Spree, released in 2020. The protagonist, Kirk Kunkel, is a failed YouTuber who jumped on every trend to become famous. However, in order to gain that fame in a short period of time, he takes on a job as a rideshare driver, and he both films his passengers and his interactions with them, and kills them, or at least tries to. Not only does he film for his personal gain, but other characters react to him filming them or change their behavior accordingly, knowing that they're being filmed. But the most important thing is that the dashcam itself is referred to in-universe by Kunkel himself and the characters, and Kunkel physically manipulates the camera multiple times. Because he is streaming his, spree killing, the screen life aspects of his YouTube live chat and interactions of viewers, including on the website formerly known as 4chan, give the camera extra importance. Not to mention the fact that there is a brief moment where the dash cam falls on the ground. Kunkel has to pick it up and reattach it, but it's upside down. The stylistic differences between Spree and Thesis, there's a lot of them, but the plot or character difference is that the main cast of Thesis are carrying around physical cameras that people react to a lesser extent than Kunkel, but they know that they're being filmed. But unlike Kirk Kunkel, they're not a jerk about it. They don't like draw attention to themselves while filming, and they don't provoke reactions from people just to increase the spectacle of their footage. Not to mention that it's a more grounded setting because they're not filming for the sake of gaining an audience, at least not for financial gain. In Thesis, characters film the entire time and accommodate risk. They can't negate it entirely, they know that, but they accommodate risk instead. At the same time, they don't compromise filming quality. I went out of my way to augment the first-hand experience I had with filming on handheld camera, not on smartphone cameras, when I was in college. By learning how, like, chest-mounted or head-mounted, like, body cams and stuff worked. And I made sure to mention the camera in narration even when not in use. Characters are checking on their cameras to make sure that they're positioned properly or that they're still functioning. They don't leave the camera behind whatsoever, even during action sequences. Characters make body cameras out of improvised materials. In fact, for most of Thesis, the protagonist, Emery, uses a body camera that they constructed from scrapped or destroyed equipment. And because of the advancements in large language models and generative AI that would have occurred both in the story and in real life, I had characters say and do things and alter their filming techniques to decrease the odds that people would think that their footage was fabricated in some way, even if doing so put themselves in greater danger, especially if what they did put themselves in greater danger, which is why they brought their camera along during action sequences. They essentially combined filmmaking expertise with filming historically important events. To conclude, I'm going to discuss the camera's presence in the audio adaptation of Thesis, or at least in the 3 promotional shorts. I collaborated with Maxwell DeMarco to integrate handheld camera Foley into the shorts, loud enough to be heard but not enough to intrude. Specifically, the camera's Foley occurred while the narration mentions characters manipulating the camera, for instance, creating certain shots, or while characters around the person or people filming did something interesting enough warranting being filmed. In particular, when someone filming zoomed in on an object or person of interest.
Hi, my name is Thomas Mengert. I work with Blue Forge Press, and I'll be reading today from the Confessions of Sherlock Holmes, volume number 3. The background of this is that Sherlock Holmes, even in the original tales of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, he talked about Holmes visiting Khartoum in the Sudan, and so he was doing an unofficial mission from Mycroft, and I will be doing this with somewhat of an accent for the Khalifa's part. The Khalifa had listened with the closest possible attention to my summary of the international situation. He looked upward for a moment in thought and then spoke in a quiet and cultured voice. "So, England has eyes for many lands, does it not?" said the Khalifa. Perhaps that is why you have come, to warn the jackal that the lion approaches and that he should flee. I answered him at once that England would be a friend of the Khalifa and of Islam, as witnessed by England's partnership and association with rulers of Egypt over many years. But then we would be as Egypt is, dancing, as you say, to the music of the British, he answered with a knowing smile. You are here to tell me that behind your so quiet words there is a great many gunships that sail up the Nile, and many British soldiers, is that not so? Once again I demurred and told him that British intentions were honorable and would protect the Sudan from the Dutch, the French, and the Germans. Yes, and if one of their emissaries was speaking to me now, he would assure me that he intended to protect me from the British. Fortunately, Allah fights with us. We need, as you have said, the word protection, but ask for no assistance from you. We are not strangers to your ways. Have not the Irish been protected by you for centuries? Were not the Americans across the Great Sea once protected by England? It appears to be your view that all peoples but those of your own little island have no wits. So you come to me bearing gifts, and then I, like a woman, must smile and dance for my silks and spices and perfumes. You have come to offer a marriage contract to Sudan. But we would not be your first wife. We would be there to serve you and to beg for whatever you would choose to give us. Is that not so? I told him that it was in the nature of power to seek a balance, and from that balance there would be peace. I told him that the Sudan was necessary to maintain that balance among the other great powers of the world, and that wars would come if that balance was not settled properly. So you tell me that I must choose among many masters, so that I must do so, because otherwise the masters will make war upon each other. I in turn tell you that we have no fear of war, for Allah is with us, and the death of a martyr for Islam is honorable. Even if your words are true and war must come, what is it to us if the Christian nations make war with each other? We may even desire it, may we not? The crescent of Islam would then be poised over Europe. We would come from the east and from the south, and soon all of Europe would know and to profess the true faith. Your subtle voice is like that of the shaitan, and I shall not follow it. We know that Europe is dying. There are no alms for the poor, even in your great cities. We know that you are ruled by a woman, Victoria, which is against the order of the wisdom of Allah. We know that no one has ever been weak, has grown in strength by association with you, but that you drink the blood of the peoples you have conquered and turn their people into slaves. If our positions were reversed, and it was I who was to offer you protection in London, would you take it? I spoke up then rather heatedly and told him that we British abhorred slavery, and that it was he and his people who were engaged in the trade of human beings. Colonel Moran looked over at me with a sudden significant glance, and I wondered if I had just sealed my doom by my candor with the Khalifa. Fortunately, my comment did not produce outrage on his part, who made no effort to hide the practice of enslavement of the local black tribes. So it is with us. The Prophet has not forbidden it. Do not even your own Christian writings speak of slavery and that slaves must be faithful to their masters to please God? It is the way of life that some shall rule and others must be ruled, but Allah is he who decides who is to be a slave and who is to be a master. There we are. And here is the book. This is the third volume of Sherlock Holmes. And this is where he goes to Rome with Dr. Watson. And a mission is there in the later volumes of the 7 volumes of series of the Confessions of Sherlock Holmes. Thank you.
Hi, you guys. My name is Jennifer DeMarco. I have volunteered for Blue Forge since 1989, and I work with all 4 of the Blue Forge divisions, Blue Forge Films, Blue Forge Press, Blue Forge Sound, and Blue Forge Gaming. Today I am going to be reading to you guys from my collection of short stories, Hannah at Night and 12 Other Stories. And I'm going to be reading to you from one of my favorite stories of all time called When Wanda Woke the World. It is my dream that someday When Wanda Woke the World will be made into an animated short film. And I've started to make the moves to hopefully make that happen. When Wanda Woke the World. It's winter now. Those long, dark days after Thanksgiving, but before Christmas, when no one really wants to brave the icy bite at the top of an aluminum ladder to hang seasonal lights. It's still early enough that no one is invoking Ebenezer, but all the same, Main Street is already lined with lopsided wreaths made by the Evergreen Scouts and cheap plastic sleigh bells that don't ring and never will. Bundled against Jack Frost nipping at their anything, not so early bird shoppers marched between mom and pop shops of consignment crafts like painted rocks and crocheted dog sweaters. The holiday crooning of Bing, Bruce, and Willie pipes thin and unconvincing through the 10-year-old speakers set into the store awnings. But it all sounds like lies until Ellie or Louis made an auditory appearance, and then shoppers turned away from each other, cheeks flush with truth as gazes avert. Slate Town is not the town it once was. Or perhaps it's finally what it always was, cold. Dark and cold as any grave. It's known now, a destination, not one to visit, but one everyone knows. They have recognition for both who they are and what they created. They're like Flint or Tijuana or Cape Town. Slate Town isn't a generic small town anymore. They're synonymous with what lies and injustice can manifest. They're a warning sign. Jason held an embarrassingly pink thermos in his right hand, but he shoved his left deep into his jacket pocket and wondered why he hadn't worn gloves. What have you done to deserve gloves? He admonished himself. The signal changed from red to white, and Jason walked. But halfway across the intersection, his cold fingers found the stone, and he stopped. He didn't just stop walking. He stopped breathing. The quarter-size disc of slate, impossibly, was warm. But impossible hadn't meant the same thing in Slate Town since September. It was deep into fall, when ivy becomes a gradient of green, yellow, red, clinging to the aged gray grit of the contemporary Corinthian columns of the freeway overpass. Concentric ripples roil and collide across the knee-high grass, golden oak in color, each a regent jostling for position, deeded its own land root deep and crowned, wielding a scepter of seeds at the autumn wind. The cloverleaf of 4 thoroughfares that steadily funneled a stream of cars and freight in all directions, but especially away, was most often used to identify the meager towns surrounding it, the Slate Cloverleaf. It was easier to remember that catchy moniker than the 1,000-some souls who clung to Americana in the middle of the Pacific Northwest. Welcome to Slate Town, Washington, the heart of the Pacific nowhere. When the sheriff couldn't catch the vandal who kept changing the town's welcome sign, he finally had it taken down. And from then on, you either knew the Slate Cloverleaf or you had no idea where you were. You were just halfway between somewhere and somewhere else. In the not-so-distant past, how distant was 1952 in the grand scheme of things? Back when TVs were black and white chubby penguins and considerably before the highway came through, The town had boasted a bustling quarry with a natural inventory of blue-black slate that rivaled the finest Brazilian imports. But after the body of little Jerome Johnson was found, devoid of life or organs, in the quicksilver moonlight pooled in the midnight tread marks of a giant machine, the quarry had been abandoned. Right from the beginning, some thought it was all connected, because they were both Johnsons, because they were both black, because the overpass was built over the old quarry. But truth be told, no one knows why or how Wanda was in the middle of the placid rainwater reservoir at the center of the slate cloverleaf. It simply came to be on that morning, that quintessential autumn morning, Wanda Johnson was just there. Someone transient, not a resident of Slate Town, made the first call, and by the time Deputy Jason Landis arrived and squeezed his 10-year-old patrol car into the questionable safe zone of the berm, 27 more calls had been made. Commuters were either hands-free and auditioning as neighborhood watchdogs, or Slate Patrol was lax in ticketing on a Monday. Either way, Shirley Pinkett at the front desk finally changed the receiving message to, "Thank you for calling the Slate Town Sheriff's Department. We are aware there is a woman in the Cloverleaf Reservoir. A deputy has been dispatched. If your call is in regard to any other matter, please stay on the line and we'll be with you in a moment." And that's the first 5 minutes of When Wanda Woke the World. A fun little tip for all authors out there who are about to read. Make sure that you are pronouncing historical and celebrity names correctly. Louis Armstrong, I had always thought was said Louis Armstrong. But actually, despite the fact that New Orleans has a lot of French influence in especially names, Louis said his own name as Louis, even though many folks in Hollywood like to call him Louis, and 2 of his 4 wives called him Louis. He called himself Louis, and so did I. Thanks for listening, you guys.
Thank you for joining us for the 5th Blue Forge Group Monthly Open Mic. This video was filmed live on May 30th, 2026 and made possible by viewers like you. Find out more about us and how you can support a volunteer-run, inclusive, nonpartisan, art-centered nonprofit at www.blueforgegroup.org.